Okay, so welcome everyone. It's good to see you. Today we have a question from one of our friends in the UK. He refers to episode 266. That was, I think, about renunciation and disappointment, something like that. And so he says, considering the circumstances you describe so eloquently, means in the episode 266, the truth of Anatta, which means not self, can only be good news, suffering predicated upon an illusion. Can you teach about this? How does one begin to contemplate this according to the tradition? And if we don't engage with this teaching, aren't we just pissing into the wind? So, let's have a look at that. Says I'm not qualified to teach about Anatta, the teachings of not self. We might go into the question a little bit that he asked, how does one begin to practice this? What's the background of practicing this? Or why should we engage such a practice? And what can we do at our stage, at our level, to properly prepare for correct insight into this very profound aspect of the teachings? Now, well, first of all, the Buddha's teachings, according to the tradition, are all about the end of suffering. So what we're looking for when we're practicing, we go deeper into these teachings, then we aim to let go of suffering. And we do that at various stages, various levels. Like literally everything we do in our life is really about that. It's really about letting go of suffering. As we move our bodies, we eat, we go to places, we visit foreign countries, we have conversations, we read books, watch movies, whatever it is that we do because we want to let go of a specific suffering. For example, when we eat, we want to let go of the suffering of hunger. When we move the body, we want to let go of the suffering of pain. When we have a conversation, we might want to let go of the suffering of boredom, and so forth. And very often we can be aware of that when we pay attention to what it is that we're doing and maybe not do it. Let's say you want to really go to the fridge and open it up and see what's in there and have a snack. What happens if you don't do that? What would you feel in that moment? What if you really want to go out and have a conversation with someone and you choose mindfully not to do that? What would you be confronted with? And then very often it reveals kind of the underlying motivation. And in most cases, this motivation is coming from a place of tension, of contraction, of pain. And that pain all builds around and circles around a sense of self. It is me and my pain, me and my boredom. I am bored, we would say. I am hungry. I want to do this, I want to do that. I move my body because I am in pain. My past is haunting me. It is also that I that wishes to be free from suffering. I would like to be free from suffering. I would like to be happy. Like every sense of happiness that we know, any time of our lives, is always due to the absence of some form of suffering. Whenever you felt good in your life, it was due to the absence of some suffering. Let's say it's Friday. Why do you feel good on Fridays? Why do you say things like, thank God it's Friday? Well, because the suffering of a working week comes to an end, right? So because that suffering comes to an end, we feel good. In the same way, when we go to the bathroom and pee, it feels good due to the suffering of a full bladder. Yes, all release is pleasure. If we release a little, we have a little pleasure. If we release a lot, we have a lot of pleasure. And if we release completely, then it is complete happiness, complete pleasure. As Ajahn Chah put it very nicely, he said, if you let go a little, you have a little peace. If you let go of a lot, you have a lot of peace. If you let go completely, you have complete peace. And so all the teachings kind of center around this. We want to say ridgepole of the end of suffering. This is the purpose of what we're doing. And already in the beginning stages of meditation practice, we let go of suffering. For example, by learning to sit still, even though it seems counterintuitive, you learn to let go of suffering. How? You might be wondering, like sitting still is torture. It's so difficult to sit still. Yes, that might be true. It's also difficult to face your problems, right? But it's valuable to do so, because by facing your problems, by not running away from them, you're able to overcome them. Whereas if you run away from them, you will stay in a state of perpetually running throughout the entire life, maybe. So it's then this kind of endless running, endless suffering. Because your problems will always catch up with you. Always. You can run very far. They're always following you. And that's because your mind is always with you. And that's where all the problems are. They're in your mind. So when we learn to sit still, we have to confront where our body lacks strength. It gives us the opportunity to add strength to these areas. So you are able to then overcome certain sufferings that are due to an unhealthy body. The body might be weak in the lower back. Why is that? Or maybe you are holding it in a really bad position throughout the entire day. So, well, here is the opportunity to give strength to your lower back. And it becomes obvious when you try to sit still. Maybe you're trying to sit still and you notice that you're incredibly nervous and fidgety. It's literally hard for you maybe to sit for a minute or two just calm. Not moving your fingers, not moving your arms, not moving your legs. Maybe that points to a general sense of restlessness that's with you. Maybe you have a nervous problem, and it can be addressed only because you're now aware of it, you see it. So you have a good chance to overcome it. If you not choose to look away. If you're honest enough to face that. Yes, I can't. I can't sit still. So then you can develop skills. In order to overcome suffering, we have to develop skills. And every little thing that we do is about developing skill in meditation practice. For example, skill of holding your attention with the object for a longer amount of time. And that skill leads to calm in the mind. That calm leads to sense of joy. That joy leads to rapture. That rapture leads to bliss. That bliss leads to one-pointedness. That one-pointedness leads to such a strong mind that it can penetrate through to reality and it can understand what you really are. And upon understanding that, it can attain a state of release and release from suffering. And this whole path is about releasing things that are in the way of your joy, in the way of bliss, in the way of rapture, in the way of feeling peaceful and good within yourself. So a lot of the work is to confront what is in your way and then develop the skill to release it, to become free from it, to not be enslaved to it. Let's take, for example, an emotion such as anger. Anger might arise as a habit within our being when confronted with certain buttons that push you, right? So then anger comes up, and there it is. Now you could run away from it by addressing the apparent object of your anger. Say it's another person. So you run away from confronting your anger by confronting the person. It's a form of running away from it. You're not dealing with the problem, you're dealing with a symptom. The other person in your life is a symptom of your anger. It's not the real problem, it's not the root. The root is your anger. And you would have the chance to kind of address it, to turn your awareness around and look at yourself. And see, that's where the fire burns. That's where I need to add water. That's where I need to cool down. That's where I hurt. Here's your chance to deal with the actual problem. Instead of releasing more of your fire onto the world, there's already enough, isn't there? So this is a very practical example of something to be released. Now, how do I release the anger? I might be aware. Let's say I'm aware. I notice I'm really angry. I'm burning. I'm on fire right now. How do I release that? You release it by giving it space, meaning by dealing with it beyond the two kind of approaches. Like the one approach would be pushing it away. The other one would be being attracted into it. Aversion or attachment. Liking or disliking it. Expressing it or suppressing it. You have to learn to deal with anger differently. So beyond these extremes of expression or suppression. How do we do that? Well, the key to that is attention. And just attention. Just pay attention to it. Just look. Just look. That's difficult because we're not used to that. We're not used to dealing with things in life on that level of just being aware of it, giving it space. We're much more used to dealing with things in terms of doing something to those things, like doing something to your emotion, stopping it, getting rid of it, killing it, eliminating it, erasing it. But instead of doing that, we give it space. Very literally, what happens when you're angry? If you're very observant and you look closely, you will notice that you're contracting around it. You're becoming tight and tense around it, even in your body. Where do you feel angry in your body? Now look at that space when you're angry. It might be your heart, it might be your belly. Isn't it like very contracted energy there? Dense and tight and packed, trying to shield yourself, your muscles literally trying to shield the rest of your body from the fire that burns in that constricted space. Now relax those muscles. It means you have to confront the danger of the feeling opening up. As you're opening up to that feeling of maybe fear, maybe anger, maybe whatever, you open up to it. It's counterintuitive when all we want to do is shut it out, put it away, not looking at it. You have to do the opposite. You have to look at it and then relax with it, around it. That's what means when you give something space. That's what you do. You relax. You start with your body. It's very physical work. Lots of people have these ideas that mental work or spiritual work is all about the spirit, the mind, like fancy ideas. No, it's very physical. When you notice just how much the mind expresses itself in the body, you will know what I'm talking about. Where do you feel your anger? You feel it in the body. And what's the nature of it? Nature is contraction. What do you do with it? You relax. You do the opposite of contracting. Nice image that I really like from my own childhood. When I was younger, we had these sponges, these round, natural kind of sponges. And when you wouldn't use them for a week, then they would become like dry and brittle. And then you put them back into the bath water when they're all dry, and they open up in the warmth of the bath water. They fill with water quite fast, actually, and become very soft. Think of your anger like that. It's this dry, brittle sponge. Think of your love, your kindness, your acceptance, your awareness as that warm bath water. You put it into that, it opens up. It loosens up. It becomes very soft. And it will expand when it does that. That's the first moment of it healing. It tries to evaporate. It literally tries to leave you because you kept it imprisoned in your attention for a long time. It's habitual. So now you opened the prison door. So it's an immediate unfolding, and many people feel overwhelmed by that. So you need to gradually learn to give yourself space. Because our first reaction to suffering is what? Contraction, shutting down, running away. You have to literally learn the opposite. It's probably also why the Buddha said that his path is going against the grain. He's mentioned that in his teachings. This path is one that goes against the grain of the world. What does the world do? Fight or flight. Being confronted with a problem, what do? You fight or you run away. Freeze is another one, right? You freeze, you're just a little bundle of tension. So we have to learn to relax. You learn to relax when sitting still. Suffering comes up, what do? Soften around it, relax. Relax anyways. That could be a good slogan for meditators. Relax anyways. Imagine people would be doing that, relaxing anyways. Someone is in your face, offends you, you relax anyways. You allow the truth of that moment to be there, and you're not fighting against it. That's the way to end violence. You cannot end violence by being violent against those who are violent. How would that work? How would that ever work? Right, I think it's another one of those beautiful quotes of the Buddha in the Dhammapada. He said, you cannot end hatred by hatred. Only by love can you end hatred. That is an eternal truth. And now people think of love as this warm, fuzzy feeling that's kind of undefinable, kind of blurred out, whatever. But it's a very specific state, rooted in acceptance. It is love that gives things space. It is love that accepts you for who you are. It is not demanding anything. It is pure attention in its essential form. So if you can approach yourself like that, your whole body, mind go through a transformative process. And layer by layer you shed the skin of your suffering. And as you shed those layers, you have to confront those layers which are underneath it. And you can only do that if you keep paying attention continuously to yourself, not to people in the world. Forget them. Pay attention to yourself. People in the world are merely a symptom of your mind. They're merely there to give you feedback on where you're tense or relaxed. So you literally learn to be okay with yourself, slowly, slowly. And only when you open up in such a way to yourself will you realize all those things which are not you, which are not yours. Now we slowly come towards that process of letting go of the most fundamental layer of suffering, which is the sense of self, or identification, as it's probably better called. I'm with my teacher on this. He says the word ego or self it's probably not a very good idea to use it because it makes it into such a stable kind of thing. The problem is not an ego or self which is somehow in you. The problem is identification. So let's say an emotion comes along like anger. The emotion is born first, it arises, and then we take birth into it. Think of it like that, okay? There is something going on. I'm simplifying that. It's not entirely correct what I'm saying. Actually, it's due to identification that anger arises. That would be the absolute correct way. But now think of anger as a car that comes by. You could now let the car drive by, or you could hop into it and start driving it. Okay? Anger is like that. An emotion is like that. You can get born into it. Then you will have a life in it for a certain time. You will be there as the angry being, the angry me, and then that anger dies after a while because it naturally comes to an end. Like everything in life, it dies. So when it dies, you die with it. And then you take birth into the next emotion, the next thing. And so we maintain that continuous sense of identification. We're mostly identified, aka contracted into various states that float along. So we are heavily identified with our body. We're heavily identified with emotions. We're heavily identified with thoughts and ideologies and belief systems and so forth. That is the problem. So how to deal with this and how to practice it according to our tradition was the question of Chris. Well, according to the tradition, what you do is you first build virtue. You first build a quality of life in which regret doesn't arise. So you're not feeling a sense of regret about yourself and your actions. In other words, you like yourself. What is it that you would need to do to like yourself? We all know what it is. Do those things then. What is it that lets you sleep peacefully at night? What is it that you personally know? This would benefit me if I did that. And this will harm me if I keep doing that. Well, shouldn't you then stop doing those things? And shouldn't you then develop those things which are good for you? So do you have a healthy sense of yourself, good self-respect, and no regrets in your mind? In other words, you're living a lifestyle in which your mind is free to engage in deeper practice. The second approach after that is building the skill of samadhi or concentration. Yeah. So we are bringing the mind into a unified, stable, still state. We let the mind literally calm down. So in order to let your mind calm down, you have to stop steering it. You have to stop messing with it. That's meditation. It's a meditation practice. You learn to take your hands off and let your mind calm down. Right? As your mind settles to a great extent, you will experience joy, rapture, bliss, happiness, an expansion of energy, vitality, and unbelievable clarity and strength inside of yourself. Now you want to put that to good use, right? So we go to the third development. We put this stable, still mind to good use to see clearly into the various things that arise in it, such as the body, the feelings of the body, the play of your five senses. And you look into fabrication, thoughts, beliefs, images, past, future, etc. You look into the mind itself. So you turn the mind around to see itself. You look at the looker. So St. Francis of Assisi said, is what you are looking for is where you're looking from. So we want to turn the mind around. To be honest, for most of us, this is a nice quote. And you should realize that also, please. It's a nice quote at that stage. It becomes something very real if your mind becomes very, very still. Right now the mind is way too occupied and filled with the play of the five senses, with thinking and intellectualizing and blah blah and all that. First we need to learn to calm that. And before that, calming the body. And before that, calming your actions. This is according to tradition. So you get your life in order. You develop space for proper meditation practice. Authentic, real meditation practice. Then you go deeply into that. You still the mind completely. When the mind is completely stilled, you then use it to see into truth, into reality. When the mind is very still, it can be sustained. The seeing becomes sustained. It becomes so powerful that it's kind of traumatizing, you could say. That is then enlightenment. It is a true insight. You're traumatized for good. You've seen too much. You can't unsee. So you will never have any more a feeling of me, I. Even though there is experiences, these experiences are not connected to a sense of self anymore. You're not feeling I walk through the park. Rather, you're well aware that there is walking in the park. Nobody walks, though. There might still be emotions such as anger, maybe at that level, short terms and bursts of it due to habits. But you immediately look through it and you see that doesn't belong to anyone. Here's the practice, because your mind is strong enough. And also we need to say that too, because your mind becomes highly empowered in the practice of samadhi in the middle stage of those three trainings, when you're developing this calm and strength of the mind. And with it comes happiness, so you're able to rely on yourself. You can then drop everything else. You're not emotionally dependent on the world anymore. That's really, really important. If your mind is not calm and quiet and able to make itself blissful, you won't be able to detach from the world. You can't. Only if the mind becomes blissful and happy and profoundly calm, then you're able to separate properly. Then you let go like a millionaire. You're not letting go like a poor man. Most people want to let go prematurely. They think of letting go as like the large level of letting go. Oh, there is no self, everything is illusionary and blah blah and all that kind of stuff. But they haven't yet let go of even the minor points on the path. They haven't even begun really practicing and confronting themselves yet. They haven't really looked into the true issues at the base of everything yet. So what are they letting go of? It's intellectual at best. That's already nice. Okay, I understand. It's a nice kind of little brain game that we can play, but it's not the real deal. The real deal is always based on deep stillness in the mind. So work on that. The more still your mind becomes, the clearer you can see. And then not self starts to dawn. You start to understand more and more naturally, to say that, naturally that there is a consciousness, but that which is within it doesn't belong to anyone. There is no person that is an owner of whatever appearance there is. That naturally starts to dawn as a result of good, stable practice, according to the tradition. So, I think that might cover some of it. How to begin to practice is like live a life so you're not experiencing regret, you're at ease with yourself. Practice meditation, still the mind, to a great extent, really work on that well. And then gradually, as your mind becomes stronger in samadhi, you will start to see naturally the truths of not self, impermanence, and suffering for yourself. All right, so that is all that comes to mind for today. I hope that was helpful in some way and answered the question at least a little bit. Do you have any questions now? All right then, guys. Thank you very much for coming.
Thank you.
Have a good day, have a good week.